On Thanksgiving Day, I arrived at my daughter's house unannounced and saw my granddaughter shivering outside in 38 degrees weather, wearing only a thin sweater and jeans. Inside, the whole family was sitting at the holiday table enjoying turkey and laughing in the warmth. What I did next changed everything. My name's Harold Stevenson. I'm 62 years old, and I need to tell you what happened 4 months ago. Sometimes a man reaches a point where he's got to stand up, no matter what it costs him. This is one of those stories. It started with a text message while I was sitting in my driveway. My neighbor wrote, "Saw police cars at the Henderson place again. Domestic situation. Made me think of you and your family worries." That got my attention real quick. The Hendersons lived 3 houses down, and their situation reminded me too much of what I was worried about with my own family. My wife Dorothy used to worry about their granddaughter before she passed last year. Now it was just me doing the worrying, and lately I'd been worrying plenty about my daughter Patricia and her marriage to Kenneth Palmer. The clock read 2:30 p.m., time to head over for Thanksgiving dinner. I shifted my old pickup into reverse and backed out onto Desert View Drive. Phoenix was having one of those rare cold snaps. Temperature had dropped into the high 30s, which might not sound like much to folks from back east. But out here, people just aren't ready for real cold. I had the radio tuned to the classic rock station Dorothy and I always listened to. Led Zeppelin was playing something that matched my mood perfectly. The passenger seat held 2 gift bags for my granddaughter Susan. Art supplies mostly. Watercolor paints, sketch pads, charcoal pencils. That girl had real talent, always drawing something. Dorothy used to say, "Family's all we have left, Harold." She was right about that. After 22 years in the Army and losing her a year ago, I understood what really mattered. Family was everything. I tried calling Patricia's house to let them know I was coming. The phone rang 6 times before hitting voicemail. That was odd. Usually someone picked up, especially on Thanksgiving afternoon, stopped at a gas station to fill up and grab some coffee. The kid behind the counter was shaking his head about the weather. "Roads are getting slick with this cold," he said. "You driving far?" "Just across town. Family dinner." "Be careful out there. Temperature's still dropping." Back on the road, I started thinking about Susan. She'd seemed different this summer when we went hiking up in Sedona, quieter than usual. When I'd mentioned coming for Thanksgiving, she'd gotten this look on her face and said something about Kenneth having new rules for the holidays. Should have pressed her harder about what that meant. Dorothy would have known the right questions to ask. The drive took about 30 minutes, and I spent most of it remembering things, like how Susan used to run to hug me when she was little, how she'd light up when we talked about her art projects. Lately, though, our phone conversations had gotten shorter, more careful, like she was walking on eggshells even talking to her own grandfather. Patricia's neighborhood looked picture-perfect as always. Desert Springs subdivision with its neat rows of ranch houses, each one decorated for the holidays. Christmas lights were already going up on some of them. I could see warm light spilling from windows where families were gathered around dinner tables, sharing stories and passing dishes. This was supposed to be one of those perfect holiday moments. Patricia's house sat at the end of the block, the beige ranch with red tile roof that Kenneth was so proud of. His SUV was parked in the driveway next to Patricia's sedan, smoke coming from the chimney, holiday decorations all over the front porch. Everything looked normal and peaceful. I pulled in behind Kenneth's SUV and turned off the engine. Through the windows, I could see holiday lights twinkling and hear music playing inside. Sounded like everything you'd want from a family Thanksgiving. Then I saw her. Susan was sitting on the front steps, hunched over with her arms wrapped around her knees. No coat, no hat, just wearing a thin purple sweater and jeans. Her shoulders were shaking, and not just from the cold. My truck's temperature gauge showed 38 degrees. "What the hell?" I said out loud, throwing open my door. The cold air hit me like a slap. In the time it took me to get to her, I could see her lips had turned blue. Her hands were pressed tight against her body, trying to stay warm. "Susan," I called out, moving as fast as these old legs would carry me. "What are you doing out here?" She looked up, and the relief in her eyes just about broke my heart. Her face was pale, almost gray, with red patches where the cold had gotten to her. "Grandpa." Her voice came out barely a whisper, teeth chattering so hard she could barely get the words out. I can't." I was already pulling off my heavy jacket, wrapping it around her shoulders before she could finish. This kid was ice cold, shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. "What do you mean you can't?" I helped her stand up, had to steady her when her legs almost gave out. "How long have you been sitting out here?" "I'm not allowed." She pulled my jacket tighter. I'm not allowed to go in the house. That hit me like a punch to the gut. Behind us, I could hear laughter and TV sounds coming from inside. Family celebration going on while my granddaughter sat freezing on the front steps. What do you mean, not allowed? This is your home. Please don't make it worse, she whispered, glancing scared at the front door. If Kenneth hears you... Right then I knew this was bad. Real bad. I looked at that house, all those warm lights, the decorations, sounds of people having a good time, then back at my granddaughter sitting there blue-lipped and shaking. Something was seriously wrong here. Come on, I said, guiding her to my truck. Let's get you warmed up first, then you're going to tell me what's going on. Got her into the passenger seat and cranked the heat to full blast. Wrapped another blanket around her shoulders from my emergency kit. Her hands were so numb she couldn't even grip the blanket properly, so I held them between mine, trying to get some warmth back into those fingers. Talk to me, sweetheart, I said, keeping my voice calm, even though inside I was getting madder by the minute. What happened today? She stared at her hands for the longest time. I was helping Mom with the pumpkin pie. She asked me to watch it while she took a shower. Her voice was so small I had to lean closer to hear. I forgot to set the timer when I put it back in. Got distracted by a text from my friend Gerald. You forgot to set a timer? The pie got burnt on the bottom. Not ruined or anything, just darker than it should be. She finally looked at me, and I could see she was scared to death. Kenneth came in and saw it, and he exploded. My jaw tightened up. Exploded how? Started screaming about how I'd ruined the whole holiday. Said the guests would think Mom couldn't cook, that I was embarrassing the family. Susan pulled that blanket tighter around herself. Then he said I needed to think about what I'd done, and I couldn't come back inside until I'd learned some responsibility. And your mother? Where was she during all this? That question came out harder than I meant it to. Susan looked away from me. She tried to say something at first, but Kenneth told her to stay out of it. Said this was between him and me. She swallowed hard. She didn't argue with him after that. I checked my watch. 3:20 p.m. Susan, what time did this start? Around 11 this morning, 4.5 hours. This son of a gun had left my granddaughter outside in near freezing weather for 4.5 hours over a slightly burnt pie. I took a few deep breaths before I could trust myself to speak without yelling. Has this kind of thing happened before? The way she hesitated told me everything I needed to know. Sometimes, she whispered, when I mess something up. Last month he made me sit in the garage all evening because I forgot to take the trash out. And there was this time he locked me in my room for 2 days because I accidentally broke one of his beer bottles. Each word felt like somebody was driving nails into my chest. This was my granddaughter, this smart, talented kid who wouldn't hurt a fly. And she was talking about being treated like some kind of prisoner. Your mother knows about this stuff? She says Kenneth's just trying to teach me discipline, that I need to learn to be more responsible. Susan's voice cracked a little. Maybe she's right. Maybe I really am just... Stop right there. I turned to face her completely. Don't you dare blame yourself for this garbage. What that man's doing to you isn't discipline, it's abuse. Plain and simple. Susan's eyes went wide. No, Grandpa, please. If you make trouble, he'll just... Take it out on me later. He always does. I could see that house through the windshield, still all lit up and cozy, still full of laughter and holiday music. My daughter was in there serving dinner while her husband's stepdaughter sat freezing in a truck, too scared to even ask for help. Listen to me, I said, taking her hands again. You're 16 years old. You shouldn't have to live like this, and I'm not going to let you. But where would I go? I don't have any money saved up. Can't afford college without... You're coming home with me tonight. Soon as I said it, I knew it was the right call. We'll figure out everything else later. I could see hope and fear fighting each other in her expression. Hope because maybe somebody was finally going to help her. Fear because she'd learned not to trust that things could get better. He won't let me leave, Susan said quietly. He'll call the police. Say I stole something or that you kidnapped me. I looked at that house again with all its perfect holiday decorations and felt something cold settle in my chest. Dorothy had always been the one who smoothed things over when there was family trouble. She'd find some way to make peace without anybody getting too upset. But Dorothy wasn't here anymore, and making peace wasn't going to help my granddaughter. "Let me worry about Kenneth," I said, opening my truck door. "Right now, we're going to get your things." Stepped out into that cold air, boots crunching on the frost. Susan scrambled to follow, still wrapped in my jacket. The front door was locked, but I wasn't planning on knocking anyway. Looking at Susan more carefully now, I could see things I'd missed before. Faint marks along her jawline, the way she held herself, like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. "Why didn't you tell me how bad this was?" I asked. "I tried to drop hints," she said, pulling my jacket closer. "But you always talk to Mom, and she makes it sound like—" That's when it hit me. All those phone calls where Susan had tried to tell me things, and I'd brushed them off as teenage drama. Like that time she'd called and said Kenneth wouldn't let her eat dinner with the family anymore, said she had to earn her way back to the table. I'd laughed it off, thought she was being dramatic. Or that call this summer when she told me Kenneth made her throw away 3 paintings she'd been working on for weeks because she'd left her art supplies out. When I'd asked Patricia about it, she'd just sighed and said Susan was exaggerating, that Kenneth was teaching her to be more organized. "How long has he been treating you like this?" I asked, though I had a feeling I wasn't going to like the answer. "Since Mom married him 2 years ago." Susan's voice was barely a whisper. "Started small, making me redo chores if they weren't perfect. Then it got worse. Now I remembered that fishing trip we'd taken last summer. How Susan had seemed reluctant to go home, kept asking if we could stay another day. When I'd pressed her about it, she'd just said she liked being out on the water. But now I could see what was really going on. She hadn't wanted to go back to that house. "The garage thing," I said, pieces clicking together. "You said he locked you in your room for 2 days. How many times has stuff like this happened? More than I want to count." She was looking at the ground now. "Last Christmas Eve when you came to visit, I actually slept in your truck that night because he'd locked me out for forgetting to bring in the mail." My truck. She'd slept in my truck on Christmas Eve while I was inside enjoying the holiday, thinking everything was fine. The guilt hit me like a freight train. I looked toward that house where warm light was spilling from every window. Perfect suburban holiday scene while my granddaughter had been sitting out here freezing, thinking she deserved it. "Your mother knows about all this?" Susan nodded. "She says Kenneth's just trying to make me a better person, that I need to stop being so sensitive and learn to follow rules." That did it. The anger I'd been holding back started building like a fire in my chest. Dorothy used to tell me to count to 10 when I got like this, but Dorothy wasn't here, and counting wasn't going to help Susan. "Come on," I said, standing up and keeping her wrapped in my coat. "We're going inside." "Grandpa, no, please. If you make a scene, he'll just... What?" I looked at her straight on. "Make you sit outside in freezing weather? Lock you in your room? Sweetheart, it can't get much worse than what's already happening." Susan looked at that front door like it was the entrance to hell. You don't know how he gets when someone stands up to him. But I was already walking toward the house, Susan following behind me. That front door looked solid and expensive, Kenneth's pride showing in every detail of his perfect suburban setup. I didn't bother knocking. My boot hit the door right beside the lock with everything I had. 22 years in the Army and decades of construction work had left me stronger than most guys half my age. The wood cracked like a gunshot, and the door slammed open so hard it bounced off the wall. Warm air rushed out, carrying the smell of turkey and the sudden sound of complete silence. I walked into that entryway with Susan right behind me, and what I saw made my blood boil. The dining room table looked like something from a magazine. White tablecloth, fancy candles, crystal glasses catching the light. Kenneth sat at the head in his pressed shirt, carving knife in hand like he was the king of his castle. Patricia was next to him in a green dress, hair all perfect. Some little girl, must be Kenneth's daughter, sat across from them with a forkful of food halfway to her mouth, all of them frozen like somebody had hit the pause button on their perfect holiday moment. Here they were, warm and comfortable, enjoying their feast, while Susan had been shaking outside for over 4 hours. The turkey looked perfect. Everything was just like a Norman Rockwell painting, except for the fact that they'd left a kid outside to freeze. "Have you people completely lost your minds?" My voice echoed through that room like thunder. The little girl dropped her fork. Patricia's face went white as a sheet and she knocked over her wineglass trying to stand up. "Dad?" Patricia's voice came out like a squeak. "What are you doing here? How did you—" While you're sitting here having your fancy dinner, this girl was freezing outside. I pointed right at Susan, still wrapped in my coat and shaking. 4 hours, Patricia. 4 damn hours in weather cold enough to put her in the hospital. Kenneth slowly put down his carving knife and stood up. He was bigger than I remembered, probably had 40 pounds on me, but I'd been in scraps with bigger guys than him back in my army days. Who gave you permission to come into my house? His voice was controlled but dangerous, the tone of a man who wasn't used to being challenged. This is private property, and you're trespassing. I could see him sizing me up, trying to figure out if he could intimidate me into backing down. He puffed out his chest and started moving around the table like some kind of predator. Private property? I stepped forward to meet him halfway. You mean the property where you locked my granddaughter outside to freeze while you had your dinner party? The little girl started crying. Patricia reached for her, but she kept looking back and forth between me and Kenneth like she was watching a boxing match. This is a family matter, Kenneth said, his voice getting louder, and you have no business interfering with how I discipline. No business? I could feel my face getting hot. That's my granddaughter you nearly killed with your family matter. Susan pressed closer behind me. I could feel her trembling, not just from cold anymore, but from pure fear of what was about to happen. This was probably the first time anybody had ever stood up to Kenneth in his own house. That holiday music was still playing in the background, some cheerful song about being thankful. Hell of a thing, holiday music while my granddaughter had been sitting outside freezing. I pointed straight at Susan. Look at her, Kenneth, really look at what you've done. Kenneth crossed his arms and stuck his chin up like he was proud of himself. The girl ruined our holiday dinner. She needed to learn about consequences. A lesson? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You nearly gave a kid hypothermia over a burnt pie. She's 16, not a kid. And this is my house with my rules. Kenneth's voice got that know-it-all tone that makes you want to punch somebody. I'm trying to teach her some responsibility, something her mother obviously never bothered with. Patricia flinched like he'd slapped her, but she didn't say anything back. Just sat there, taking it like she probably always did. Responsibility. I moved closer to the table, close enough to see the grease on his plate, smell the wine on his breath. What you call responsibility, the law calls child abuse. Child abuse? Kenneth actually laughed, this cold sound that made my skin crawl. She forgot to set a timer and ruined a $15 pie. I sent her outside to think about her actions. That's not abuse, that's parenting. For 4 hours in 38-degree weather. She's being dramatic, like always. Kenneth waved his hand like he was brushing off a fly. Look at her, she's fine. Little bit of cold never hurt anybody. I looked at Susan, still blue around the lips and shaking even with the warm air. Fine. This piece of work thought hypothermia was fine. Dad, please, Patricia finally spoke up, her voice all shaky. Don't ruin our holiday. We can talk about this later, as a family. Ruin your holiday? I stared at my own daughter. Your kid was sitting outside freezing while you ate dinner, and you're worried about me ruining your holiday? That's when I made up my mind about what had to happen next. I pulled out my cell phone, slow and deliberate, so everyone in that room could see exactly what I was thinking about doing. Kenneth's face changed when he saw the phone. That smug confidence cracked around the edges. Either you apologize to my granddaughter right now, I said, my voice deadly calm, or I call Child Protective Services and tell them about leaving a 16-year-old outside in freezing weather for 4 hours. You wouldn't dare. Kenneth stepped closer, trying to use his size to push me around, but I dealt with bigger bullies than him back in the day. Try me. I started dialing. I've got plenty to tell them. Behind me, Susan grabbed my arm. Grandpa, please. If you cause trouble, he'll just make it worse for me later. Dad, don't do this. Patricia jumped up, hands out like she was trying to stop a fight. Don't tear our family apart over this. I'm not tearing anything apart. I kept my eyes locked on Kenneth. He did that when he decided to abuse my granddaughter. Abuse? Kenneth's laugh was nasty. I was teaching her responsibility, something her weak mother never managed to do. Patricia flinched, but she still didn't stand up for herself. Just took it like always. Get out of my house, old man, Kenneth said, his voice getting louder. You've got no authority here. Susan's my responsibility now. Your responsibility? I looked around that perfect dining room, the fancy glasses, the expensive dishes, the holiday centerpiece. then back at my granddaughter's scared face. "This is how you handle responsibility?" The little girl was crying harder now. Patricia was trying to comfort her while shooting scared looks between me and Kenneth. "She's 16, Kenneth said, puffing himself up. "And in my house, teenagers who can't follow simple rules get real consequences. Real consequences for forgetting a timer. Real consequences for being careless and ruining our holiday." Kenneth pointed to some empty chairs. "We had guests here, family, and they all had to leave because of the scene she caused. So they'd had other people over, eating dinner and socializing while Susan sat outside freezing, and nobody had said a word about it. "Grandpa, let's just go," Susan whispered. "Please, I don't want to cause more trouble." The defeat in her voice broke something inside me. This smart, talented girl had been beaten down so bad she thought she was the problem. "You're not causing trouble, sweetheart," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You never were." I looked Kenneth right in the eye. "You've got 10 seconds to apologize for what you did today. I'm not apologizing for anything." Kenneth crossed his arms, chin up like he was king of the world. "And I'm sure not taking orders from some bitter old fool." "Then we're done here." I put the phone away. "Susan, go get your stuff. You're coming home with me." Dead silence. Even the little girl stopped crying. "You can't just take her," Patricia said, barely a whisper. "Watch me." I put my hand on Susan's shoulder. "Go pack what you need. We're leaving." "Dad, you can't do this." Patricia followed us toward the stairs, panic in her voice. "You can't just walk in here and take my daughter. I can and I am. Unless you'd rather I call the cops and let them sort it out." Susan led me upstairs to her room. Tiny space at the back of the house, barely big enough for a bed and dresser. No heating vent I could see. Window faced north where it stayed coldest. Looked more like a storage closet than a bedroom. "This is where you sleep?" Susan nodded, stuffing clothes into a bag. "Kenneth says the guest room is for visitors and the other room is for Carol." She didn't call the other girl her sister. Even in her own house, she was an outsider. "Take everything that matters," I said, watching the door. "We're not coming back." "Susan, think about what you're doing." Patricia appeared in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "This is your home. Some home," Susan said, folding her art supplies carefully. "Real families don't lock people outside to freeze. Kenneth was just trying to teach you." "By giving me frostbite?" Susan looked at her mother, and I could see 2 years of hurt in those eyes. "Mom, he made me throw away my paintings last week because I left my easel out. He just has high standards." "He wants me gone," Susan said, zipping up her bag, "and you know it." We headed back downstairs. Kenneth was waiting at the bottom like a bouncer. "You leave my house, girl, and don't ever come back." "Fine by me," Susan said, and I heard real strength in her voice for the first time that day. The front door was still hanging open, cold air pouring in. I could see my truck in the driveway, engine still running. "Susan," Patricia called out as we reached the door. "Please. I love you." Susan stopped, looked back one last time. "If you really loved me, Mom, you wouldn't have let this happen." We walked to the truck without another word, threw her bag in the back, helped her into the passenger seat. Through the house window, I could see them still standing there. Patricia crying, Kenneth red-faced with anger, the little girl peeking around the corner. "You ready?" I asked, putting it in reverse. "I've been ready for 2 years," Susan said. We drove away from that perfect suburban street, past all the other houses where normal families were probably finishing their holiday dinners in peace. The radio was still playing classic rock. The heater worked fine. And for the first time since I'd gotten there, Susan looked like she could breathe again. "Thank you, Grandpa," she said quietly. "I can't believe you actually came for me. Should have come sooner. Should have seen what was happening. I tried to tell you, just didn't know how." 3 months later, the cops arrested Kenneth Palmer on child endangerment charges. He got 18 months and lost his job. Patricia finally filed for divorce. Susan's living with me now, got a full scholarship to study art therapy at Arizona State. She wants to help other kids going through what she went through. Some nights we sit on the back patio looking at the stars. She's got her sketch pad out, drawing. I've got my coffee. We don't talk much, but we don't need to. Family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up when it matters. It's about protecting the people you love, no matter what it costs you. Dorothy would have been proud.